already had 2 of the Arcane Journals released, or flavour pamphlets, as I have called them in the past. The Bretonnian and the Tomb King one, and the Orc one is merely weeks away. Not only that, but we've had a reveal of the cover of the Dwarf one, and a tantalising hint as to what might be contained there within. To the point, therefore, of the 9 factions that they said they were going to release as part of Warhammer the Old World, we've already, in essence, seen what is likely to be in the characterful journals of 4 of them, so nearly half of them. Therefore, I am of the view that I can now roughly deduce what is going to be available in the Arcane Journals for each of the remaining 5 armies. So, buckle. 6, I suppose, if we count the Dwarf one. We don't technically know what's in that, although it's very heavily been hinted at by the reveal from Adepticon. But so, buckle up and let's dive in. So, okay, in terms of what has been revealed so far for Arcane Journals, in the Bretonnian one, we got kind of a slightly different version of kind of Bretonnian Knights. We got slightly different kind of combinations in terms of things like the errantry list. We got slightly different wizards, slightly different yeomans, but mostly units that utilise the existing kits that Games Workshop already produced. The only one that they kind of threw out there from left field was the Bombard, which of course is a notable part of Bretonnian history, but not something Games Workshop releases a model for, which I think is one of the things that's quite cool about Warhammer the Old World, because we're back in the days of converting. It's something that Games Workshop moved us away from for a long time, in terms of unit entries could only have war gear that Games Workshop models already came with. Now, though, we're back in the Wild West. We are back in the world of, hey, just take this kit and smash it together with that kit and get a whole new unit entry that they didn't otherwise sell. Incidentally, you'll have to buy both kits. Likewise, therefore, with the Tomb Kings, we got an idea about what sort of things you might get in terms of characterful units for an army. In particular, we got the Tomb Guard Chariots, which I think are really cool. We got the Necro Serpents, which is basically the Necro Serpent Riders, but without the riders on top. But incidentally, you can put those riders in chariots and make Tomb Guard Chariots. We got things like the Venerable Ushabti. We got stuff that was variations on existing kits, but again, that added character and flavour to the armies. With the Orc Arcane Journal, which is, like I said, only weeks away, and I'm planning on doing another of my highly scientific analyses of it once I get my grubby little mitts on it. We saw something slightly different. We saw the return of kits that had been produced by Games Workshop but are long gone. So, for example, the Troll Hag, or the classic metal ogres that are making appearances, Badland Ogre Bulls. But still, we also are getting things like the Black Orc Chariot entry that is going to feature in the Arcane Journal. We're getting the Bone Grinder Giant, which was that rarely released Forge World kit that I'm personally planning on using one of the great big Age of Sigmar giants to represent, because I think they're cool, and I'm loving the idea of being able to get one of those in my Orc army, or even getting them into like my Empire or my Chaos army, because they do have the mercenary rule we have seen for the Orc Arcane Journal. But so, in terms of the Dwarf one, in the Adepticon preview, we saw that we were going to be getting a re-release of, for example, the Doom Seekers, those classic dwarven slaying of whirling dervishes that were released back in Storm of Chaos. And also, bizarrely, we're getting a release of the Goblin Hewer, which technically hasn't been invented by the period in which we're playing, but never mind. That does lead me to suspect, incidentally, that we're going to be getting a Carrick Cadrin list, the Slayer Keep, as one of the 2 thematic lists in the Dwarf book. But likewise, we saw, for example, the return of Bugman's Ale Cart, a really classic miniature that I'm going to have to dust mine off and finally get painted if it's going to have rules in the Arcane Journal, which I suspect the other list we might get in there is some kind of Bugman's Brewery list. Precursor to when it was burned down and Joseph Bugman went off and rampaged around the old world, killing orcs left, right and centre. I think that what we might see actually is a re-release of the Metal Dwarven Bugman's Rangers models alongside Bugman's Cart to literally just do this is a brewery expeditionary list. Someone's got to deliver the beer, and what could be more dwarven than that? What this means, though, then, is really there's kind of three things that make up the unique entries within an Arcane Journal. And this perhaps hints at what we might see in the remaining 5 Arcane Journals. So let's first of all identify what those three things are, and then let's talk about what that means for the remaining 5 armies that are going to be released potentially over the course of this year if they keep up this pace. The three things I would suggest are this. Converted units, so things like completely creating a unit out of other kits, such as the Bombard that, for example, we've got in the Bretonnian book, where they kind of suggest, hey, why don't you use, an Empire cannon with some Bretonnian yeomen to guard that? Cool. Then we have a returning kit option, so things like the Troll Hag, or things like the Bone Grinder Giant, things like the Goblin Hewer or the Doomseekers that I think are going to be featuring in the Dwarven Arcane Journal. The third option then is kits that are being used in ways that they had not been used before. So for example, the Necroserpents, which it was entirely possible that you could make them as Necroserpents of snake surfers, or you could make them up as the really cool kind of snakes with pole arms and turning everybody into pillars of sand gaze, the Stalkers. But what they've turned around to in the Tomb King book is gone, hey, you can just build these without anything on it, just build them as snakes. And they'll look cool, and here are rules to use them as that. Likewise, things like the Tomb Guard Chariot or the Black Orc Chariot, where it's the, hey, you can just buy a Black Orc kit and some chariots and mount your Black Orcs in your chariots, mount your Tomb Guard in your chariots. They are kits being used, existing kits being used in different ways. So, these are the three things that I think kind of make up the design ethos of what's going into Arcane Journals. And what I think it might mean going forward is this. So, let's take them army at a time. I'm going to do them in this order. I'm going to do Warriors of Chaos, Beasts of Chaos, High Elves, Wood Elves, Empire. Seems a reasonable way to go about it. Warriors of Chaos then, first and foremost. Okay, so what returning models could we see that we do not currently have in the Warriors of Chaos list? The answer to that is really not much. I mean, in terms of all of the different kind of unit entries that were present in previous editions of Warriors of Chaos are mostly there. And in fact, some of them have made a return when they didn't, when they've been gone. They're actually already in the main army list, such as the Forsaken, which I'm assuming at some point when Warriors of Chaos get their re-release, those will just become, hey, part of the Warriors of Chaos range. One of the only things really that at the moment is not in the Warriors of Chaos list, that was in Warriors of Chaos back in 8th edition, is things like Blood Crushers. Now I know that they've currently got a happy little roll over in Age of Sigmar, but they've already shown that there is nothing to prevent them from going, hey, let's stick those back on some square bases and sell them for the old world as well. So I think things like Blood Crushers would be a logical choice to return, some heavy cavalry for Warriors of Chaos, and likewise they could, I suppose, introduce things like Warriors of Chaos mounted on Steeds of Slaanesh, which we've obviously got in the Slaaneshi section of the list. But in terms of other out-of-production kits, really, they're part of the Warriors of Chaos list. Chaos Trolls, Chaos Ogres, they're all there already. So I don't think necessarily that there's much in the way of older kits that they can reinsert into the Warriors of Chaos army list. What does that leave us then? Well, it either leaves us with entirely new inventions that you're required to convert, and there I can only speculate as to what mad things that they might want to come up with. I mean, in the going back to the Storm of Chaos, which obviously we're seeing new units come back from the Storm of Chaos Dwarf list, they did have in that, I think they were called Flayerkin, and they were basically kind of huge mutants with knives hammered into their fists, which you could make out of a combination of kits. You could convert them out of the mutation sprue that was available at the time, some Chaos Warriors, some Skaven bits, some Beastmen bits, just whatever you got that made big hulking gribbly mutants with knife fists. Maybe they might go reach all the way back to the Warriors of Chaos lists back in Storm of Chaos and go, hey, let's put the Flayerkin back in. They existed back then. I'm not so sure. The only other thing really that I can think that they might kind of throw in there from a flavourful point of view is to do things like chariots that are pulled by, beasts from the thing. We've got the Gore Beast chariot, we've got the Chaos chariot. Maybe we get the, chariot pulled by Blood Crushers, Juggernauts of Khorne, chariot pulled by a Beast of Nurgle or something of that nature. That's the only thing really that I can think of that they might throw in there as kind of a new unit entry and then expect you to convert your own. The third option then we really have is just kits being used in ways that they were not previously used before. And again, unfortunately, at the moment, as it stands, there isn't much in the current or the previous Warriors of Chaos range that lends itself to that level of conversion. The Marauder Horseman kit, which is very happily being replaced by new Dark Oath in the Age of Sigmar, and therefore guarantees it to be making itself known in the old world. Likewise, the previous all heavily squarely ranked up Chaos Warriors and heavily ranked up Chaos Knights models that we had in plastic, which I fully expect to make a return, don't really lend themselves to alternative builds. I'd like to think that maybe, just maybe, what they might do is they might throw it open to some of the cooler models that we're getting in Age of Sigmar at the moment. So maybe we might get something like the Vanguard or something like that making an appearance as an Uber Chaos Knight chosen unit or something of that nature. But beyond that, I'm really hoping that what we'll get is just new models for that. I know it's not one of the things that was kind of on the list of 4 things, but I'm really hoping we get some new models, maybe a kit that can be used in a couple of different ways, so that you can build it this way and make a really cool new unit of Chaos stuff, or you can build it that way and make a really cool unit of new Chaos stuff that we haven't seen before. That's Warriors of Chaos. Beasts of Chaos is a little bit easier. Beasts of Chaos obviously has models that it used to have that it does not have. I mean, they're talking here, of course, about things like Khorngor and Pestigor, which had some gorgeous models back in 6th edition. I have fond memories of painting the stores Pestigor back when the Storm of Chaos was going on. I was working at the Swansea Games Workshop and we had these lovely icky, sticky Pestigor models that we had to paint up. I love painting those, and I'd love to add some to a Beasts army at some point. But there is absolutely nothing stopping them from bringing those back, and I can fully imagine that those might make an appearance in a Beasts of Chaos Arcane Journal. Likewise, the Zangor that made their appearance in Age of Sigmar and also have made their way over to 40k, it would seem logical to simply make the same kit available to the old world and having 3 flavours of Chaos God beasts available. And given that there are the Slaneshi version, I think there's a box of 5 in Age of Sigmar, again, there is nothing to stop them from throwing those in there as well and giving us all 4 different flavours of kind of Bestigor type monstrous beasts within a Beastman list. That would be really cool, and I'd love to see that. Beyond that, though, the other stuff that we might see is, I suppose, kits, as I've said, being used in ways they were not otherwise intended to be used. Now, what kits are available to the Beastmen at the moment that could be converted in that way, could be, modified in some way, shape or form? And I think the Minotaurs are the ones that I look at and I go, okay, maybe we might see something a bit different here. At the moment, the Minotaurs are these big kind of blocky, ball-shaped, big axes or 2 axes held like that. But it wouldn't take much for them to say, okay, take the Minotaur kit, for example, and mix it in with some of the bits from the Dragon Ogre box, for example. So give it some of the big kind of 2-handed weapons, or give it the big kind of Thunder Mace type weapons to make something different, to make an uber spiky version of Minotaurs for a beast list. And they say this only because I have a strong fondness for Minotaurs. I personally would also love to see the metal Minotaur models that Trish Morrison did make a return, because those were gorgeous kits. And it would be cool to see those make a reappearance. Beyond that, I suppose, we've already got things like the Centaurs and the various kind of Grimly monsters, like the Jabberslithe and the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth in the Beasts of Chaos list. There are other monsters that existed in the history of Warhammer, though. I mean, things like, I know we've got the plastic cockatrice, it's a resin cockatrice, they might re-release it as resin, they might re-release it as metal, but there were loads of other kind of weird and funky monsters back in Games Workshop's history that they produced, and it would be a great opportunity to see those making a reappearance in a beasts list, kind of going, oh yeah, here's some alternative beasts of the forest, monstrous creatures, maybe things like the Thing in the Woods from Mordheim. How great would that be if that came back as sort of wood beast or something and made an appearance? Or maybe something like, the primeval, I can't remember what it was called, the Dark Abyssal. It was a primeval hunting monster that Forge World released for Monstrous Arcane. Let me know in the comments if you can remember what it was called. It had a kind of deer skull and antlers for a head, and it really looked like some kind of monstrous creature out of like Princess Mononoke. That's the sort of stuff that I can fully imagine making a reappearance in the Beasts of Chaos list. Let's move on. High Elves, I promised you. Okay, High Elves. What unit could possibly return for the High Elves, I wonder? It rhymes with Schmadengard, shall we say. So I know that High Elves at the moment have the Sisters of Avalon, which were kind of the Maiden Guard kit that were released at the end-ish of got 8th edition, and they had a really unfortunate sculpted Alariel and a really unfortunate sculpted head of the Maiden Guard model that I was not a fan of, and I do hope we do not see a return of those. What they did have, though, back in the days of 5th edition, was some gorgeously sculpted Maiden Guard models, and it would be great if we saw a return of those and saw those within the Arcane Journal. Alternatively, if they didn't want to re-release those, but likewise they didn't want to, release a whole new kit for it, they could simply propose a conversion. The Sisters of Avalon at the moment have bows. Maiden Guard classically had spears instead. Nothing to stop you from using a Maiden Guard kit and some spare spears from the High Elf infantry box, smooshing those together and making Maiden Guard with spears. But that is absolutely a unit that I feel is going to make a reappearance in High Elves. Other than that, a lot of the other kits are already kind of back. We've already seen that we're going to have Dragon Princes back, Illyrian Reavers back, the Flying Chariots are going to come back, Phoenix Guard, everything that you kind of expect in a High Elf army otherwise is going to be there. Again, I turn my brain to the Storm of Chaos and wonder, well, what might they take from that as perhaps inspiration? The High Elf list in Storm of Chaos was weird. It was kind of this Sea Guard expeditionary force, and you had as many Vault Throwers as you could carry, and giant Merworms, which Games Workshop didn't release a model for. That being said, I do believe that what we might see is perhaps some kind of lesser form of dragon. So although we've got we know we're getting the huge mountain on the back of a rock dragon coming back, Games Workshop produced a wealth of dragons over the years, absolutely oodles of them. And the period in time in which we're looking at for the High Elves is not as far away from the kind of end times era of the High Elves as I would like, but it is still several centuries earlier than it was at the time that the world that was previously portrayed. So there's nothing to say that they could not have more dragons and griffins and eagles and other such creatures in a High Elf list, were they of a mind to do so. And again, Games Workshop have a huge back catalogue that they could dive into. You want a smaller dragon that you can mount your princes on and have dragon princes actually on dragons, a small unit of, maybe 3 flying heavy cavalry, gosh, a bit like Bretonians have, but elves deserve them too. That would be an eminently sensible way to go, and maybe just do it by way of releasing some of the older, cooler metal dragons with an elven hero mounted on it. Wood Elves. Wood Elves are kind of in the same boat in terms of almost everything that Wood Elves had in 8th edition, we have already been promised in the army list as coming back. Dryads, Treekin, Waywatchers, Treemen. There really isn't that much stuff that's not already in the list. What I do know is this, though. In the end times, when they were kind of winding down the old world, they released what are now the Kurnoth Hunters kits as a unit option within the Wood Elf army list. Those have not made a reappearance in the old world list as it stands at the moment. I know we've got Treekin instead, and they do fill a slightly different role in that regard. But I do think, therefore, given that they started out as an old world kit, then became part of the Sylvaneth range in Age of Sigmar, there would be nothing to stop them from including those in a Wood Elf list for the old world, and that would be a cool way to kind of get multiple options within that list. Beyond that, what I'm just kind of hoping for is, at the moment, we don't really have much in the way of kind of like Treeman Ancients and stuff. It would be cool if we got Durthu, the Treeman Ancient, back within the Wood Elf army list. They could release, like they've shown they're willing to do with things like the Marauder Giant, they could re-release the classic Durthu model, which was a gorgeous, awesome Treeman kit. They could re-release Orion. I think Orion would eminently be appropriate, especially if they were to release Kernothy units within the old world. To have the Lord of the Hunt there to accompany kind of the hunting tree spirits would seem appropriate. What I'm really, really hoping for, though, is that we see a brand new Alariel model. The Everqueen, Alariel's the Everqueen of the High Elves, Ariel, Queen of the Woods. They do have fairly similar names. The model that was available way back in 5th edition was pretty, but the face was a little bit dated, shall we say, in terms of just the sculpting skill, and I think it's crying out for a beautiful, updated kind of butterfly-winged Queen of the Forest. And then maybe what we could just see is something to go with that, some Wood Elves, perhaps of Ariel's court. That would be a cool option, and maybe they could give us the option to convert those out of some of the other kits that are currently available in the range. Sisters of Avalon, again, lend themselves in that regard quite nicely to, girly elves with magic bows. Gosh, they would fit quite nicely alongside as the kind of guardians of Ariel. Who can tell? Let's move on then finally to the Empire. And I do say finally because I think this is probably going to be the last one that they release, because I think it's probably going to be the biggest flavour pamphlet that they release. I think the Empire book is going to have not 2, but 3 themed army lists. I know that the other existing ones thus far have had 2 army lists in. We've seen that the Orc one, when it comes out, is going to have 2 army lists in as well. It's going to have the Troll Country list and kind of the Cult of Speed list, for want of a better word. I think the Empire book might come with 3, because we know there are 3 claimants to the Imperial throne. And what I think it would be an ideal opportunity to do would be to release a particularly thematic unit for each of those 3 claimants based upon the previous existing Empire range, which is wide and deep, shall we say. So let's deal with Marienburg first. The obvious one for Marienburg, and I'm sure lots of people, Jordan Sorcery's probably clapping his hands together with glee at the thought of this, the Marienburg, the land ship, the great big sailing ship on wheels. What could be more crazy Warhammer than that? It would seem, we know Forge World still have got the moulds for it, we know Forge World are eminently capable of re-releasing it. It was a much loved kit, it was very cool. I never got my chance to get my hands on one. I can fully imagine that they might, for a Marienburg list, give it the unique unit of a Marienburg land ship. Let's turn to Middenheim. So, the second claimant to the throne, the Lord-elect Count of Middenheim. Teutoburg Guard, can we say? I mean, we know the R. Ulrich is already in the army list, but Teutoburg Guard is not. Again, it's another much beloved kit that was released during the Storm of Chaos. They're very similar in terms of their style to Great Swords, in terms of what they do, full plate and a double-handed weapon, but they have their own unique kind of twists on it, like the wolf cloaks that make them immune to cold, the loyalty to Ulrich, and that could just be kind of worked into the rules there. I can absolutely imagine that we might get those for a Middenheim list. It would seem a shame not to take the opportunity to re-release those. Third and final then would be, of course, the Reichland and the various petty princes of Reichland. Well, again, a kit that has been long missing from the Empire range but would be eminently appropriate. Reichsguard on foot. They were there all the way through 4th and 5th edition Warhammer, then they just disappeared, replaced by great swords in the 6th edition books and beyond. But they've still got the moulds for them, they've still got the kits, or they could urge us to convert our own if they wanted to. They could say, we're not going to re-release them, but hey, take a Reichsguard Knights box and a unit of great swords, smoosh them together, Reichsguard on foot, heavy plate and a shield, 3-up save Knights, blocks. The Bretonnians have them, why shouldn't the Empire? The only other stuff I can imagine that we might see a reappearance of in an Empire Arcane Journal is things like the Moot getting representation. The Halfling Hot Pot, I love the Halfling, I've got one in the cabinet over there waiting to be painted. The Halfling Hot Pot made a reappearance on Made to Order for the Halfling team for Blood Bowl. It would be a wonderful addition if they brought that back for the old world. It would also help them out because at the moment, Halflings can take a Halfling Hot Pot as an inducement in Blood Bowl, but Games Workshop don't release the kit again at the moment. It was kind of made to order and gone again. So, re-releasing that seems like a no-brainer. And if you're going to have a Halfling Hot Pot, well, the old rules said that if you couldn't take a... Pardon me, you couldn't take a Halfling Hot Pot in your army unless you had a unit of Halflings. So let's have some Halflings, please. Halflings, Halfling Hot Pot, Teutoburg Guard. There is a wave of amazing stuff that they could do with an Empire book, and I think that is probably what we will see when their time comes. But yeah, so hopefully you've enjoyed just kind of listening to me talking through all the various different options that I think we're going to likely see in Arcane Journals in the near future. Join me again soon when I will be talking my way through, in my highly scientific way, the Orc and Goblin Arcane Journal and giving my thoughts on how that compares to Orc and Goblin books of days gone by. I will also be back with more old world content in the very near future, but if you can't wait, you can always catch me in the early week Tuesdays on the Morehammer Podcast. That's both here on YouTube, and I'll throw a link in the description below, and also up on Spotify if you want something to listen to perhaps while you're in the car or while you're in the gym. That's an ideal thing you can listen to there as well. You can get even more of my rabidly excited, feverish dreams of what we might see in the old world and other games as well. All remains for me to say then is thank you very much for watching, and as ever, I will catch you next time. Bye for now.